Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, a major scandal in North Carolina as 54% of non-domiciled CDLs issued to foreign nationals across the state were illegally issued. We'll have the details and reaction coming up. And a good Friday morning to you. Welcome to the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand by checking out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our show this morning, as always, is brought to you by the amazing team over at the Law Group here in Wilmington, Melissa Gott and her team. You can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com or give them a call, 910-251-6088. That's 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from Melissa and her team coming up a little bit later on in the program this morning. So, we've got a major scandal taking place here in North Carolina on this Friday. A shocking letter out from the Department of, a shocking letter out from the U.S. Department of Transportation. That is an entity in which Sean Duffy is in charge of. Shows a very concerning set of stats and figures out of North Carolina that could have major impacts, major ramifications for the state of North Carolina, including losing upwards of potentially $50 million, and the headline is exactly, unfortunately, what you would expect. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy revealed in a letter on Thursday that 54% of North Carolina's what are called non-domiciled commercial driver's license, that's a CDL, which you need to drive heavy trucks, big rigs, 18-wheelers, things of that nature. Those CDLs that were issued to foreign nationals that were reviewed by federal officials, 54% of them, so more than half from a percentage standpoint, were issued illegally. Before we get into the additional coverage and the additional details out of this letter, in which you will find completely appalling, this, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, is not something new. There have been a couple of major stories over the last few years, maybe 2 or 3 years, that have unfortunately unfolded as a result of this same story that you're hearing in North Carolina today, where you have got individuals who are illegally in the United States of America. We're not talking about people who aren't foreign citizens. We're talking about people who are, in some cases, illegally in the United States of America, that have gone to states like Washington State, not D.C., Washington State, California, New York. They have gone to these left-wing states and have been able to obtain a commercial driver's license. The idea of somebody who is illegally in the country obtaining a driver's license, just a regular class, whatever it is, a Class C, regular standard driver's license, the one that you and I have, the idea that that would even be allowed is an incredibly disturbing bit of information. But the idea that in these left-wing blue states, they would issue commercial driver's licenses in which these individuals, in some cases, are hauling tens of thousands of pounds worth of equipment. You see these big 18-wheelers flying down the road carrying God knows what as their haul, that those would be issued to individuals who are legally in the United States of America is a complete and total joke. We knew that this was happening in states like California, like New York, over the last 12 months. We have seen similar letters from Sean Duffy, from the United States Department of Transportation, and even some commentary from President Donald Trump about this growing concern, about this growing trend of giving those illegally in the country the ability to drive these heavy trucks. We've seen it. It's not, unfortunately, a new story. And I guess I'll show a little bit of my ignorance today when I tell you I am genuinely surprised, however, that this was also taking place in North Carolina. I am genuinely surprised by that. Now, I know We had 8 years of everybody's favorite governor in North Carolina, old Roy Cooper, who now wants to be your next United States Senator. And he has the complete and had the complete and total authority over the DMV, over the DOT here in North Carolina. All of those appointments, all of those authorities coming straight out of the Democrat governor's office. Josh Stein has now been in office a little over a year. This situation continues because Stein is making those same appointments. And there's no question about it when you look at the political ideology of somebody like Roy Cooper, the political ideology of Josh Stein. This is unfortunately kind of what you would expect. To hell with the rules. They don't matter. We're just going to stamp out and give out driver's licenses, CDLs again, talking about commercial driver's licenses, to seemingly anybody that wants one. Whether you're in the country or not legally, whether we're following federal standards or not, we're just going to give them out. And one of the most frustrating parts about all of this is how complicated the North Carolina DMV system is for people who are legally in the country. Comment coming in right now. Considering how much trouble we've gone through to get my son his driver's license, this angers me. Comment coming in on the show right now. Yeah, I'm sure it does anger you, as you have to essentially rearrange your life to get an appointment at a DMV office anywhere across the state of North Carolina. As you've got to take time off work, as you've got to jump through hoops, as you've got to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning so you can go stand in a line in front of a DMV office in the middle of the winter to get your license renewed, to get your real ID, to do whatever needs to be done with your driver's license. As you're dealing with that, the state is rubber stamping CDL, commercial driver's licenses, to foreign nationals, not legally. These are illegally issued licenses here in North Carolina. So for the citizens who pay taxes, for the citizens who follow the rules, play by the rules, go through the process, don't drive with an expired license, even though it's such a pain in the rear end to go and get a new one, for everybody that follows the rule, I guess it's just a huge slap in the face to you. That's kind of how it feels to me. I am fortunate to have my driver's license expiring here in the next month. So I'm going to have to figure out this process. Wake up at 2:30 in the morning to go stand in front of a DMV office for 6 hours before they open the door so that I can try and be one of the first people in there so I don't have to spend an entire workday in front of a DMV office trying to do something that is pretty bog standard, renewing a license. This has been a growing concern and a growing trend for North Carolinians, law-abiding, legal residents of North Carolina in the United States. The DMV system is an unmitigated disaster. It's been like this for years, and there's only one person to point a fingers at. It's not the Republican-led General Assembly. It's not the legislature. It's not Destin Hall. It's not Phil Berger. It's Democrat Roy Cooper and Democrat Josh Stein. More of this on Cooper than Stein. He's only been in office a year. But Roy Cooper was the governor for 8 years. And the excuse is always the same. Oh, North Carolina is seeing explosive population growth. And it's true. We're one of the fastest growing states in the nation. There is some legitimate concern with that. There's a lot of people moving here. When folks move here, what do you have, 6 months to get all your stuff transferred over? So yeah, there's a lot of people moving here. Yeah, there's a lot of activity going on at DMV offices. Sure, I can admit that. But that's not a valid excuse. And this, not to get too sidetracked here, but this just proves, hopefully better than anything else, the real difference between the private sector and the public sector. When a private business is seeing an explosion in growth, what do? They hire more people. They adapt the way in which they operate so that they can provide products, solutions to their customers. All right, that's in the business world, it's the greatest problem you can have. We are seeing explosive growth in our sector. People are beating down the door to buy our product or service or use our product or service. And so we scale up. We hire more people. We make it so that we can get everything running at full steam, make sure everything's running as good as possible. You see that in the private sector literally all the time. Meanwhile, you look at government, whether we're talking about state government or federal government, and in even some cases, unfortunately, local government, depending on where you live across the state of North Carolina. When there's explosive growth in that sector, when government is tasked with, oh, hey, you're going to have to issue a lot more IDs, a lot of people are moving here. What is the solution? Well, throw our hands up in the air, claim that there's nothing we can do about it. Oh, we're working on the problem. We'll have it fixed by, 2035, 2040. Over the next 15 years, we'll work on getting the problem fixed. If private business operated in that manner, private business would no longer be in business. They'd have to shut their doors because the customers, the user base would be so fed up with the lack of service, people would just go and look elsewhere. But not with government, because at the end of the day, unfortunately, you and I don't have a choice. What's the solution? Drive around with an expired driver's license? And I know there's some new legislation that allows you to do that for a year. But law-abiding citizens, people that want to follow the rules, we don't want to be in that situation. So we jump through the hoops. We go through the process to make sure we get it done. And yes, of course, those on the political left, these are the ones that want government to run everything, to solve every problem that exists in our world. Meanwhile, they can't figure something out as simple as issuing legal CDLs here in North Carolina. So, diving into some details on this letter, it was sent from the United States Department of Transportation, part of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. That is the group that is responsible for this. They sent this letter on Thursday, that was January the 8th, to Josh Stein, the Democrat governor of the state, and Paul Tyne, who is the commissioner of the North Carolina Department of Transportation and the Division of Motor Vehicles. He's the top man at DOT and the DMV. And it's concerning. These are the details as we understand them right now. Federal auditors reported that a review, and they did a review, so they don't check everything, but they pull a sample size. That's typically how you review something. Federal auditors reported that a review of 50 sampled commercial driver's licenses in North Carolina. So they sampled 50. Out of the 50, 27 of them were issued illegally. That is more than 50%. That's how we get to that number 54. 27 of them out of 50 were issued illegally. While at the same time, in 8 cases of the 27 that they found, the state, quote, this is a direct quote from the letter, could not provide any evidence that it verified the driver's lawful presence with an unexpired EAD or unexpired foreign passport, as well as a Form I-94 documenting the driver's most recent admittance into the United States prior to issuance. So to simplify what that letter is saying, out of the 27 CDLs that were deemed to have illegally issued in North Carolina, out of those 27, 8 of them, the state could not provide any evidence to the federal government that they even attempted to verify the status of said individual. Meaning, in all likelihood, those individuals are illegally in the United States of America. They have committed a crime by breaking federal immigration law, coming into the United States illegally, and were issued commercial driver's licenses here in North Carolina. What an unmitigated disaster. The letter from the Department of Transportation says that serious deficiencies in the state CDL program, which there's no other way to describe it as that, could result in the loss of tens of millions of dollars in federal highway funding and the possibility of decertification of the state's authority to issue CDLs. And so we need to dive into these two different parts. Losing the federal funding is obviously a major problem. A lot of the funding that you see for major infrastructure projects, especially on our North Carolina highways, I-40, things of that nature, 87, portions of 95, a lot of that funding, a lot of the repair and infrastructure upgrades and things, a lot of that stuff comes from federal funds. There's a thing called the Federal Highway Fund, and the federal government doles out money to states to keep those federal highways maintained and operating. Well, the state of North Carolina could potentially lose, and this letter says it plainly, could lose out on a whopping $48.7 million if this issue is not resolved. That in itself is a major, major problem. That in itself is a huge concern. And that funding would be lost in the beginning of the fiscal year 2027. $48+ million for the fiscal year. With the agency also warning, that being the Federal Department of Transportation, also warning that additional funding could be withheld if compliance issues persist beyond the first year. So not only is it an immediate gut punch that you're losing almost $50 million worth of highway funds, which, by the way, we've already seen the complete and total mismanagement at DOT as it relates to infrastructure projects. You see it. If you drive around the state of North Carolina, you see these highway expansions, you see this road work. It goes on forever. Doesn't matter where you live. I know people that have lived in North Carolina for 10 years, and they've seen the same traffic cones, the same construction crews working on something for a decade. And this is happening all over the state of North Carolina. It was back just a couple of years ago that the DOT ran out of money, again, under the direction, under the control of Democrat Governor Roy Cooper, who now wants to be your next United States Senator. DMV, under his watch, under his authority, ran out of money. Why did they run out of money? Because like all government entities, or maybe it's more accurate to say most government entities, they didn't bother keeping track. It's not their money, right? This is always the greatest con when it comes to government. Because they didn't work for it, because they don't really have anything invested into the money, right? You go to work every day. You sit behind a desk maybe for 7 or 8 hours a day. You work hard. And for that work, you are compensated. You receive a paycheck from an employer. And so when you're spending said money that you've worked for, you are, for the most part, probably pretty fiscally conservative with it, because you understand that you have to work for that money, that there is something invested in said paycheck, unless you're lucky enough to just get free money from a company and not do anything. You have put in the time, you've put in the work, and you're compensated for it. Government at all levels cannot wrap its head around this concept because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't provide a service. It doesn't provide a product to a consumer base to buy. It just doesn't. And thankfully it doesn't, because you can imagine the products coming out of the government would be probably just as good as the services they offer. So they collect it. You pay your property taxes. Coming up here in the next couple of months, you'll have the pleasure of logging into some sort of tax software or hiring a CPA so that you can pay, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars to both the state and federal government. If you're as lucky as I am as a 1099 contractor, you can write a big old fat check to the federal and state government for all of the hard work that you put in through the year. That's how they get their money. They get it through taxes at all levels, local, state, and federal. Property tax, sales tax, all these different taxes that you see. We love taxes here on the Nick Craig Show. They collect all of this money. They didn't really work for it. Most people voluntarily pay it, right? Because the alternative is to be audited by the state, audited by the IRS. So most people say, yeah, while I don't want to file a tax return, while I don't want to send a check for $11,000 to the federal government, the alternative is being gone after by the IRS, and nobody really wants that. So you voluntarily go through this system. You pay your taxes. Government doesn't really have to work for it. Therefore, they have no vested interest in taking care of it. Therefore, it doesn't really matter whether they're using those funds in a sufficient or good manner. And that's why I was, a little off track, but back to the DOT just a couple of years ago, because they didn't really work for the money, because there was no stock invested in those funds, they mismanaged it. They didn't keep control of the dollars and cents. They ran way over their budgets, and they ran out of money. That was, again, under Democrat control with Roy Cooper, because they don't really care. And, when you look at one of the real stark differences between those on the political left and political right, this is one of the major ones. The ability and the willingness to be fiscally responsible with other people's money. And we've seen that at the levels of the North Carolina General Assembly. Prior to 2010, the state was broke, tax and spend. The state didn't have any money, furloughing teachers, furloughing state employees. And what have we seen over the last 15 years? Fiscal responsibility, taxes continuing to be hacked and slashed, providing relief to citizens and businesses across North Carolina. And at the same time, the state is making more money than ever because lawmakers in Raleigh are being fiscally responsible with the things that they do. There is a strategy here that works. This stuff is not made up. You don't just wake up one morning, you don't just roll out of bed one morning as a state and go, oh, hey, we're fiscally solvent now. Everything's good to go. No, you have to be pretty disciplined with it. You've got to be pretty principled with it. And fortunately, due to strong Republican leadership in Raleigh, to the objection of those like Roy Cooper, like Josh Stein, like other Democrats, to their objection, the state's done it. And we're now reaping the benefits of that, right? There's a reason that the state of North Carolina has been issued the #1 state for business 3 out of the last 5 years from CNBC. There is a reason that people want to be in North Carolina. There is a reason that people are coming to this state. Yes, we've got a good environment. Down here in Wilmington, we've got the coast available where most of us are within 20 or 30 minutes of the beach. Phenomenal. In the mountains, you've got unbelievable sights. You've got major tech hub up in the Research Triangle Park area, a huge financial and banking sector in Charlotte. There's a lot of reasons to be here in North Carolina. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens with strong leadership. As we look at the details out of this letter from the United States, the Federal Department of Transportation, to Governor Josh Stein and to Paul Tyne, this is what failing leadership looks like. We just talked about the fact that the state could potentially lose, at a minimum, $48+ million worth of funding in the fiscal year 2027. And that's obviously significant. But this next one, the other threat, the other risk that the state is facing might be even larger. Reading from the letter. Beyond funding penalties, the letter warns that North Carolina could lose the ability to administer its own CDL program altogether if the state is decertified. Think about what that means. You see trucks on the roads all day. If you're driving up and down I-40, up and down 85, up and down 95, you see these trucks all over the place. Some of them are just passing through. Some of them are based here in North Carolina. The restaurants and bars that you eat and drink at, many of the things that they get, the food that they bring in, that is coming in via truck. You've seen the big Cisco or the big U.S. food trucks sitting at the backside of a restaurant unloading food. Those individuals that are driving those trucks have CDLs, and most of the time, those are local people. They live in your community. Their job is to pick up the food from a distribution center and make their rounds and drop it off at restaurants that are their customers. If the state loses its ability to administer a CDL program, at least in the short term, you are potentially talking about an insanely large impact on North Carolina. The ability for people in the state to get a CDL. Our community college network has a huge CDL program. One of the largest is at Cape Fear Community College down in Wilmington. They have a huge trucking program where individuals can go through a course and get their CDL. If you've been down in the Wilmington area, you maybe have seen these big CFCC trucks driving around. It's because people are learning and going through the process of getting their CDL. All that would be gone if the state loses the ability to administer and license people as commercial driver's licenses. While the letter does not immediately impose that sanction, it makes it clear that decertification remains an option if compliance is not restored with federal standards. Under federal regulations, decertification would prevent the state from issuing or managing commercial driver's licenses until federal officials determine that the deficiencies have been corrected. So not only is it new people that want to get a CDL, kids coming out of high school that, hey, college isn't the route for me. I'm going to go and spend a couple of grand to get my CDL and do that for a little while. keep the U.S. economy rolling by delivering goods, products, and services all over the state, all over the country. You like ordering stuff from Amazon? I'm guilty of that. A lot of that stuff being trucked around the country by individuals that have CDLs. So if the state does not correct its actions, and we'll get into what the federal DOT is requesting, not only would they not be able to issue new licenses, but they would not be able to manage commercial licenses, meaning renewals, any changes, anything that would have to go on. What that looks like, I don't even know. Does the federal government take it over? I'm not sure, but it could cause a huge economic impact here across North Carolina. The preliminary determinations stem from the MCSA's review of North Carolina's procedure for issuing non-domiciled commercial driver's learner permits. Those are CLPs, as well as the full-on driver's license, CDLs. The agency notes that federal law requires, not a question, not a suggestion, not something you should do, federal law requires states verify lawful presence and ensure the validity of non-domiciled licenses do not exceed the period of a driver's legally authorization to remain in the United States. Meaning, if you have a work visa that allows you to stay in the United States through 2027, let's say it expires at the end of the year 2027. The state of North Carolina then should not issue a CDL to somebody past that date. You don't issue them a driver's license until 2035 or 2036 because their work permit is only up until the end of 2027. The letter explains that the heightened scrutiny of non-domiciled CDLs was part of a nationwide review that began during 2025, surprise, surprise, during the second Trump administration. With the letter stating, as part of the 2025 comprehensive reviews, we conducted an in-depth review of state procedures and policies in issuing non-domiciled CLPs and CDLs. The Federal Department of Transportation has given North Carolina 30 calendar days to respond to the preliminary determination. The state may either outline corrective actions it plans to take or argue that the federal findings are incorrect, according to the letter. I can't wait to see that response, of which we don't have yet. I don't know how quickly we'll get it, but clock is ticking. Again, this letter is dated January 8th, 2026. So coming up here in early February, the state is going to have to respond. Now, they might do some sort of immediate response and then say, we received your letter, or we're investigating this, and then respond, but we probably will not see a response until, at the very earliest, probably the end of January, because everybody, you would imagine, is scrambling on this news. This is a miserable situation for the state. The letter states, alternatively, the state's response may explain why the preliminary determination is incorrect and may include any additional documentation the state wishes the federal government to consider. It is emphasized that the determination is preliminary and that the agency is prepared to work with the state to resolve the issues. With the letter reading, issues that are preliminarily determined of substantial non-compliance with a clear understanding of the gravity of the findings, but also with the intent of working cooperatively with the state to bring its CDL program into substantial compliance. So, this is an important part of this as well. Not only do you have this very lengthy letter, a 13-page letter, which gives example after example after example of driver's licenses, commercial driver's licenses issued to people here in North Carolina. Not only is the letter lobbing a bomb at the North Carolina Division of Motor Vehicle, but they're saying at the same time, but we're also here to help. We're also here to work through this process with you. That doesn't add up with all the media coverage I've heard of this administration over the last year. All you ever hear about is how awful Donald Trump is and how awful his administration is. And that they're taking over states, they're doing this, they're doing that. Sean Duffy, who is the head of the U.S. Department of Transportation, finds this information out, conducts the findings, conducts the research, sends this, I'll note, very strongly worded letter to the state of North Carolina, and at the same time says, but hey, We're here to help. But also with the intent of working cooperatively with the state to bring its CDL program into substantial compliance. So not only highlighting the problem, extending the olive branch, extending the handshake to North Carolina to say, let's work on this together. And boy, is that going to be an issue for Governor Stein to deal with. Boy, is that going to be an issue for the out-of-control radical progressives here in North Carolina that are suffering from very severe Trump derangement syndrome. Because I don't think they're going to have an option. They're going to have to work with the federal government. I have absolutely no faith and no confidence that the state of North Carolina is capable of dealing with this issue itself. From everything that I've read, everything that I've seen, from the hearings that I've watched in Raleigh, as lawmakers within the General Assembly have hauled individuals like Wayne Goodman, the previous head of DMV, now Paul Tyne, have hauled them in front of House and Senate Oversight Committee hearings to try and get to the bottom of what the hell is wrong with DMV. I don't have any faith and any confidence that the state is capable of managing and dealing with this themselves. So that's going to be a tricky political situation for the Stein administration to deal with. That's going to be a tricky problem for him to have to wake up and come to the reality of oh crap, we're going to have to work with the Trump administration, which flies abject in the face of everything that the Democrats have been talking about now for the better part of a year. The reaction to this is what you would expect from those on the political right, highlighting the issues that exist in many states across the country. We saw it in other states. Unfortunately, it's here in North Carolina. We'll get into those details coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But before that, I want to tell you about the law group here in Wilmington and thank them for their continued support of the Nick Craig Show and remind you that when legal challenges arise, make sure you put your trust in the law group. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across Eastern North Carolina. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating a real estate transaction, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense. If so, the law group has your back. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating a real estate transaction, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense. If so, the law group, again, has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. Great news, ladies and gentlemen. They're located in downtown Wilmington and just a phone call away at 910-251-6088. You can also visit their website, lawgroupnc.com. Give them a call for any legal challenges, 910-251-6088, or visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. The Law Group, experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the Law Group and their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. We'll get into some reaction to this coming in from Michael Whatley, members of Congress, including David Rouser and more, coming up as the Nick Craig Show rolls on a Friday morning, streaming live, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. You can get access to our show notes and more by visiting patreon.com/Nick Craig. Each and every day we provide all of the research, all of the news stories and articles that we cover here on the show. That is available to those over at patreon.com/Nick Craig. We also do a monthly hangout. We jump on Zoom for a couple of hours every month, chat about all of the news and issues of the day. Patreon.com/Nick Craig. You can also find the link by visiting the website, nickcraig.com. We are continuing now with a bombshell story here, a letter from the United States Department of Transportation that is overseen by a Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, indicating that 54%, it's almost unbelievable, 54% of driver's licenses, CDLs, that the feds reviewed here in North Carolina were issued illegally across the Tar Heel state. 54%. They looked at 50 driver's licenses, sampled 50 CDLs, and found that 27 of them were issued illegally. And so before we get into the immediate reaction to this, I'm sure some on the political left are just rolling their eyes saying, oh, this is not a big deal. This is once again just some right-wing conspiracy. This is, again, just an attempt to attack the immigrant community across the United States. We see the same memes. We see the same nonsense over and over again. You'll remember a miserable story from last year in which an individual who was illegally in the United States of America crossed the border illegally in 2018, was driving a truck with a CDL that he had received from the state of Washington because, like many other blue states, they don't bother following the federal regulations. They don't bother following the federal rules. This individual was issued a CDL in Washington state and was driving a truck when he made an illegal U-turn in the state of Florida near Fort Pierce, Florida, last year. That illegal U-turn, a car slammed into the 18-wheeler and 3 people were killed. This individual driving the truck should not have been doing so. Not only should he have not even been in the United States because he illegally crossed the border in 2018, but he was then issued a commercial driver's license. Fox News ran an article on this individual back in October of last year, and here's the headline of the Fox News article. Illegal alien failed CDL test 10 times in 2 months before fatal Florida crash that killed 3. And you want to sit here and tell me this is not a problem? You want to sit here and tell me that there's nothing to see here? This is just a boogeyman in the closet, boogeyman under the bed. There's no real issue here. This is just another situation being ginned up by the conspiracy theorists, the out of control, insane MAGA right. Failed a CDL test 10 times, is illegally in the United States of America, and Washington State gave him a CDL. He was driving all throughout the country and killed 3 legal U.S. citizens, killed 3 legal U.S. residents in the state of Florida. And that, unfortunately, is just one of many stories that have existed over the last couple of years. Back in October of last year, this is a more recent story, a 21-year-old Indian migrant who was in the United States illegally, caused a collision involving 8 vehicles on the westbound 10 freeway in the San Bernardino Valley in October of last year. This is another story, a more recent story of this situation happening. He faces 3 counts of vehicular manslaughter with gross negligence and reckless driving. He was originally slapped with the charge of vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated and driving under the influence, but it was dropped as no drugs or alcohol were detected in his blood immediately following the crash, and this individual pled not guilty to all charges. Another example taking place. That CDL for this story in October, that CDL was issued in the phenomenal state of California, under the very strong, very sane, very normal leadership of Gavin Newsom. You see the same kind of garbage in New York State under Kathy Hochul. God forbid we verify somebody's citizenship status, even though we're legally required to by federal law. Even though federal statute has not changed, It's been standard now for quite some time. If you are going to issue somebody a commercial driver's license, you need to verify either A, they're a legal citizen or resident of the United States, or B, that they have some kind of work permit or visa that allows them to be legally in the United States and legally able to work. But that is just a bridge too far for those on the political left. That is just way too stringent of a regulation for them. So they ignore it. They issue CDLs to illegal immigrants. And the end result is many of these individuals are driving around the United States illegally because the license should not have been issued. They're driving around the United States legally, and U.S. citizens are being killed because of it. Yet another example of why the illegal immigrant problem was such a big deal during the Biden administration. Another reason why, and I believe, that so many individuals showed up very strongly in November of 2024 to elect not only Donald Trump, but give Republicans the control of the United States Senate and the United States House. They were fed up with these news stories. They were fed up with turning on the television, not major networks, of course, but turning on Fox and other networks and seeing surveillance video, seeing footage of individuals illegally in the United States doing illegal U-turns, killing U.S. citizens. They were fed up with it. And I guess it makes sense when you fail your CDL test 10 times and the state issues you one anyway. I guess we shouldn't be surprised. So reaction is starting to pour in, as you can imagine. Nothing from the state yet. I can't wait to see what the reaction is from Paul Tyne and from Democrat Governor Josh Stein. Roy Cooper needs to answer for this as well. Congressman David Rouser, who represents the 7th Congressional District, that covers the vast majority of southeastern North Carolina. He is also very high up on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee at the federal level, known as T&I. He wrote in a post on X, "The result of the United States Department of Transportation's audit on North Carolina's non-domiciled CDL program are the worst in the nation. Democrat leadership allowed a culture of negligence and lax oversight to take root, directly endangering our North Carolina families and businesses. It is time to restore integrity to our roads. I am proud to stand with Secretary Duffy and American truckers in this fight for better licensing standards and highway safety." Seems like a pretty reasonable reaction there from Congressman Rouser. And he's absolutely correct. Democrat leadership didn't care. Doesn't matter if people who are illegally in the United States are driving around an 18-wheeler hauling 30 tons worth of material. Who cares? Doesn't matter if they're going to not know the rules of the road, can't read or speak English, can't read road signs. None of that matters. None of that is relevant. We'll just give it to them. My favorite was a driver's license issued in New York State probably about 6 months ago. The name on the driver's license was first name, no, second name, last name, name. So the license, the way that the name appeared on the license was no, or name, comma, no. No name. That's how it appeared. That was a legitimate driver's license issued by the state of New York. No name. That's the situation that is unfolding in front of our very eyes right now. Michael Whatley has responded to this situation as well. He is a Republican running for the United States Senate. If he is successful in the March primary, he will be battling off against Roy Cooper, who is the individual responsible for a lot of this. In the statement from the Whatley campaign, it reads, "Roy Cooper put illegal aliens ahead of law-abiding North Carolinians, and our state continues to pay the price. From supporting Joe Biden's open border agenda that allowed criminals into our country to backing sanctuary city policies and permitting unqualified drivers behind the wheels of heavy commercial vehicles, Roy Cooper has repeatedly put North Carolinians at risk." Hard to argue with that statement as well. A lot of truth in that. The question's going to be, will there be accountability? My guess is no. And in large part, it is because the media landscape in North Carolina, a large portion of it, is controlled by the progressive left. Right after this story, right after this letter was sent on Thursday night, I immediately went over to WRAL.com. North Carolina's news leader, the powerhouse that is WRAL News in Raleigh. This is a pretty major story. Would you agree to that? The state of North Carolina is at the risk of losing nearly $50 million from the federal government. At the same time, they also risk losing the ability to license CDL drivers. They lose the ability to administer a CDL program. No renewals, no new licenses. And so this last night I went to their website and I went to it again this morning. I don't see it on the front page. It's not in any of these major stories on the top. Let's keep scrolling down. Car crash in Wake County. Hundreds in Durham protest ICE after Minnesota woman's death. Federal immigration officer shot and wounded 2 people in Portland, Oregon. Look at this. All the way down here. Nothing. No story at all. On the front page, at least. I'm sure if I dig into the North Carolina capital section, it might be in there. Actually, no, it's not in there either. So it's just not a relevant story to cover, I guess. Not something that needs to be looked into. This story, this letter, came out late Thursday night. WRAL has a 24-hour news team. They could have put together a story on this if they wanted to. They've chosen not to. They'll probably publish something at like 4 o'clock this afternoon on Friday. Nobody will read it because it's Friday afternoon. People are genuinely kind of checking out, getting ready for the weekend. So maybe they'll publish something then. But as of right now, doesn't matter. It's not a big enough story. Again, even though the state is on the hook of losing nearly $50 million. At the same time, losing the ability to administer a CDL program. What an unmitigated disaster. Roy Cooper needs to answer to this. Roy Cooper is going to have to, and I hope he does, be put in a position where he has to defend this situation on a national stage, where he has to stand up in front of voters in North Carolina and explain to them why he thought it was a good idea to issue those illegally in the United States commercial driver's licenses, putting you and I, our friends, our family, our coworkers at risk by individuals who should not have CDLs. It's not because we're not compassionate. It's not because we don't care. It's not because we despise the immigrant community. No, it's because federal standards require it. You have to be a legal resident, a legal citizen, or have a valid work permit to be issued a CDL. That is what the federal guidelines and regulations require. You don't have to like it, but you do have to follow it. States like California, Washington, New York, and unfortunately, as I report to you this morning, North Carolina feel that requirement is just too damn burdensome. That it is just a bridge too far. So they ignore it. They issue these licenses. They don't care what the ramifications are. They don't care if you and your family get hit by one of these illegal immigrants driving some sort of 18-wheeler. They don't care if you get killed by them. They don't care. As long as they get those CDLs issued, problem solved. And to kind of close what we were talking about in the first segment, the irony of all of it. Meanwhile, you and I, law-abiding, tax-paying residents of the United States, citizens here in North Carolina, we have to wait 9 months to get a freaking appointment at the DMV. You have to essentially give away your firstborn child to try and get an appointment to renew your driver's license. That's what's going on in the state of North Carolina. Plenty of time to give licenses to illegal immigrants, but for those residents in the state, to hell with you. Enjoy waking up at 2:30 in the morning, 3 days in a row to try and get into a DMV office. Bravo, North Carolina. Bravo, Roy Cooper. Bravo, Josh Stein. Bravo, Wayne Goodman. Bravo. Done a hell of a job issuing these licenses. Hell of a job with this program. I am waiting. I can't wait to see what the reaction is here across the state. If we had an honest, fair news ecosystem in North Carolina, this would be a phenomenal story. This would be something that would be and should be front page news on every single news outlet. But the state's largest news outlet in the state, WRAL News, doesn't even have a freaking story about it. Why might that be the case? Why do you think WRAL News doesn't have a story on this? Because there's only one person to blame. Roy Cooper and Josh Stein. Two Democrats. It's the only group to point the finger at. You can't blame Phil Berger for it. Can't blame Destin Hall for it. They don't appoint to the DMV. That's the appointment authority of the governor, which I would argue, and hopefully we see this when the General Assembly gets ready to come back here in a couple of weeks. I think they need to run a piece of legislation to remove the DOT and DMV appointment authority, take it away from the governor, give it to somebody else. He's obviously incapable of doing so. Under Roy Cooper's direction at DMV, they were issuing illegal driver's licenses to citizens in North Carolina, to non-citizens here in North Carolina. That is not a good situation. They allowed it to happen. So with that being the case, I would argue that the General Assembly needs to remove that appointment authority from the governor's office and give it to somebody else that's actually going to do it. Give it to somebody else that will actually hold the state agency that they're responsible for accountable. We've seen it with other things. We saw it with the State Board of Elections. We just saw it this week with the North Carolina Utilities Commission. I think it's time we do the same thing with the DMV. It's obvious that the governor's office, both Stein and Cooper, are incapable of appointing somebody to the position that is following state law and making this system run for North Carolinians. I will be watching and tracking this throughout the day today, but it's going to be very interesting to see what the statewide reaction is. If anything relevant breaks, I'll have details over on my social media throughout the day. You can give me a follow over on X at Nicholas M. Craig. You can also follow and like The Nick Craig Show on Facebook as well. I'll keep an eye on everything throughout the weekend. And if relevant, if newsworthy, I'll bring you the latest coming up Monday morning right here on The Nick Craig Show. Well, that's going to do it for a Friday edition. Thanks to Melissa Gott and the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. The Nick Craig Show streams weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. It's also available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app and can now be heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on Charlotte's FM News Talk 107.9 WBT. Have a great weekend. We're back with you here Monday morning on The Nick Craig Show.